if you're watching Saving Private Ryan and they run up to the sand berm and they're sitting there and Tom Hanks is looking around with his little shaky hands and whatnot, and they go like, fuck, we need to clear this, and there's the dude that runs with the giant tube. That's a Bangalore. That guy's
those things are badass.
They are.
Can you describe what a Bangalore is for people that don't know? Because it's pretty badass.
So a Bangalore is about like a 6 foot long metal tube just packed full of C4. And what you do with it is you slip it into like a wire obstacle, or you slip it into something that you don't want to exist anymore. And they've got these ends like that you can marry up, 2 female ends and like a nose cap. So you can string like 6, 7 of them together, and you pull it and it just blows up, and so it will clear a route, and then you have to clear it with your mine detectors and then everything. But it opens up obstacles. So it's just a giant explosive tube.
It's amazing.
And so he runs up with his giant, they refer to him as like torpedo, sometimes, but he runs up with his Bangalore Torpedo, places it, blows up the obstacle, everyone goes through. The engineers were also clearing mines off the field to get people clear. So there's this one story where there was a mined area that the Germans had mined. They needed to get off the beach, and so the engineers were literally body clearing it. They would go up, one engineer would hit a freaking mine, he'd lay the flag, they'd either find a mine and flag it, or if they blow up. At one point, an engineer used the flag, stuck it in his dying body in order to indicate like this is the clear path, and that's what got people off the bridge. And so like that mentality in these individuals, we got the engineers from the French. The engineers originally started off protecting artillery. They were the infantry for the artillery regiments. But we got all these different things. Like in Korea, we built a giant tunnel, then put explosives under the North Koreans, and then we blew up a portion of their army. In the medieval times, we would dig under walls, put a bunch of swine in hay and burn it, because the pig fat would burn so hot that it would pull towers and pull walls down because it would melt the stone. So like they were the Swiss Army knives. And so our training covered like all these different aspects. How to make sure that waterways are clear and unpolluted, how to assess like the infrastructure of a city, how to do offensive and defensive operations, how to do counterintelligence operations, like all these different things, because the infantry is probably going to take umbrage with this, but our idea as 12 Bravos or as engineers was we were just the smarter infantry. We could shoot, but we could also blow shit up.
How much did you get to blow up in like this advanced officer engineer school?
So the answer is not as much as I wanted to.
Right.
But
which is the answer of like every 20-year-old boy. You're like, they're going to let me blow shit up.
But compared to the average individual, quite a bit. Like in basic, we learned how to make charges to breached walls and doors. We learned how to make water impulse charges. We learned how to do cratering charges in Ebola. Like we only had like really 2 days, but we would go out there and we'd learn shape charges and cratering charges and how to tie in C4s in like C4 and whatnot. We learned how to tie all our demo knots and how to use the new and the old school style of explosives. We learned the mechanics behind explosives, things like that. And so that's a lot of words to say. We basically blew a 40 by 40 foot floor into the Missouri clay, like hole into the floor of this Missouri clay. And while we were in our bunker, like 5 foot chunks of earth raining down around us, because you've taken a giant tube, like a barrel of explosives, attached more explosives on top of it in order to detonate it, and created this charge. And it's to blow up roads and bridges and whatnot. We learned how to cut steel with explosives, because explosives in themselves either push or they cut. So like anytime you see an explosion in Hollywood that's all a bunch of fire, the fire itself is just wasted energy. Realistically, you either put it on the side of a road and the force pushes the vehicle over, literally takes it off, or you put it on like a steel beam or something and it explodes and it cuts, it shears it. And so that's like, if you're going to take down a bridge, you don't want to stack a bunch of explosives and just try to push it with concussive force. You want to strategically place it and have it shear certain sections so that the bridge collapses under its own weight, things like that.
So this is one of the things, that shocked me when we were doing C4 explosives and whatnot. The volume of material that it takes to destroy something is pretty astronomical. Like you see in the movies, they put like a little patch of some plastic explosive and you see like this whole wall disintegrate. It's like, no, that's not how it works. Like the amount of C4 it took just to bring down a telephone pole or a metal pole was shocking to me, how much material you need in order to get that shearing explosive force.
So The numbers are probably incorrect in my mind. I believe C4 has something like 2.5 pounds to 4 pounds of explosive force for a block. And like if you open it up, it looks like the inside of a ice cream sandwich, which is really, really cool. It looks so tasty, but it's super toxic. And so it requires like pressure and heat to set off. So if you do it wrong and you put your blasting cap or whatever your demo cord inside of it, you don't get enough force, or enough pressure, it blows up into these tiny little chunks that are like heated, that if you would step on them, that pressure would be enough to like blow off your toes or your foot or whatever. But like a grenade, the effective area of just one of them isn't that much, because realistically, we don't want, hey, Private Scott, here's a single thing of C4 in your backpack, and then you're running through a combat zone and that blows up and takes an entire company out. Like that's just physically and every instance about that is like super improper and dumb and not physically possible. But when it comes to like calculating, we like to say P for plenty. But if you have a steel beam, it doesn't take that much, because you're not taking like 10 pounds of explosives and just putting it next to the steel beam. You're taking the intersection, the cross section of these steel beams, you're offsetting them so that the force of one, like this earlier statement, everything's like water. We tend to go the path of least resistance. The same thing with any plasmas or explosives. So if we have like a shape charge, you just put a little bit of styrofoam, it directs the charge one way. Well, if you put 2 pieces of C4 on a beam, the charge is going to go this way and the charge is going to go that way, and it's going to cause a shearing action. So while it is going to be an explosive expanse, generally, like if you set anything off, like let's say in space, you're going to get like a nice little circle, because everything is the path of least resistance. If you set it off against, if it's tamped, generally like you put sandbags or something behind it, it's going to funnel the explosive force one direction. So you do that, cuts a steel beam. But one steel beam does not make a destroyed bridge. So you have to like find a few steel beams. You have to find a few supports. You need to take it out. You need to do all this like calculations and math stuff.
Yeah. Anybody who hasn't ever watched a shape charge go off in slow motion, immediately go to YouTube and Google shape charge slow motion, because it's amazing. To your point, putting a sandbag behind a piece of C4, or like, I remember those little cone charges that like the Navy SEALs used to bring down boats. Yeah. So it creates this cone of like hot magma that just, it's amazing how funneling that shape of the detonation creates a little like softball size, a little softball size magma ball that will just melt through the hull of a boat. It's the most amazing thing. So everybody should go Google this, stop listening to this podcast and go Google shape charge slow motion. It's just the coolest thing to see what we can do with explosives.